Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, you were talking about it last week.
Was that?
How you were going to see it.
Ah, yes. Right.
What's it called? Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Hanks plays Mr. Fred Rogers.
So you finally watched it?
We watched it last night. Yeah. The movie's flawed, but it's intensely watchable.
Why is it flawed?
Because there's a plot that is loosely based on real events, but something that maybe in a series you could spend a few weeks developing needs to be developed and wrapped up in half an hour, which works in the rhythm of the film, but afterwards you feel very unsatisfied by it because it seems so typical. The typical big huge problem and then gets resolved, and I didn't like that.
You don't see like the people working on it. Do you remember Spotlight?
Yeah.
There was a cool feeling in that movie where you could tell things were not just getting resolved. There was an article written, but all along there was like ups and downs, and it was kind of quiet, and it was just happening, and then the next one, and then
much more nuanced, much more
livable.
Yeah, it's real. It's more real life. This seems very much like a movie because of how the problem resolves. Yeah, but it's not. That's not the reason to watch this film.
Yeah.
The better film about this man is the documentary.
Yeah.
That came out a few years ago.
Does it have footage of him, or how does it do it?
It's what the documentary. Oh yeah, of course. It's mostly footage. Yeah. It's like a biography. So this man seems the character that he plays on television, because it's a children's character, seems ridiculously kind, friendly, innocent, all of these things. But the reality is that this was a very intelligent man who lived his life very similarly to the way the character did. He was very kind, very, very kind man. A very kind man who insisted on intimacy. If he was going to spend time talking to you, he would get personal very quickly. This was not about talking about superficial things. He often wanted to know about people's childhoods. And so the film shows him, I mean, I already know, for someone who has never seen the film or doesn't know very much about Mr. Rogers, there's a bit of a mystery that gets resolved in the film because you realize who this person is throughout the film. I knew what to expect, so that's not a mystery that I needed, but what I enjoyed about the film was seeing him interact with this journalist. So the idea is that there's a journalist who writes for Esquire magazine. He's relatively famous, but he's also developed quite a reputation for eviscerating his subjects. He's an angry man, and he's an angry man, but we don't see that right away. But we start realizing it. He's an angry man who often writes in a pretty cynical way. He's a very good writer, but he writes about topics he's cynical about the world. He's cynical about life. And a lot of people don't want to be interviewed by him anymore. And so the magazine is doing a piece on heroes in America. And he's given this assignment to interview this Fred Rogers. He only has to write, it's a short piece, it's 400 words. It's a little, I forget what the term for it is, but it's short piece, you know, everybody, this issue is an amalgamation of many short pieces on different heroes. And this journalist in the film is the journalist that I listened to last week. When I was coming here on Saturday, I listened to an interview with him on CBC. And that's what made me really want to see the film. The film was on my list to watch, but it made me really want to see the film. Because, well, the short explanation of the film is that this man's life is profoundly changed by his time with this man that he's interviewing. But it's changed in a very interesting way. And the scenes where there's interaction between him and Tom Hanks, I thought were excellent. Really well done.
Does the documentary show their relationship?
The documentary does not mention the journalist at all, because the journalist was one of many people that the documentary is really worth seeing. This is a person that should be remembered, because especially in a world that has become so cynical, he was such an easy target for people because he was so good and friendly and kind and blah 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 that he seemed almost Pollyannish. But as you see with the documentary, he had a really wonderful goal, and his goal was to teach children empathy, how to deal with their emotions, how to be kind. And he also wanted that in the media. He wanted that to be, respectful media that seems to have been a major failure. But he very smart man. Bardzo mądry człowiek. Może popatrzymy na ten film. Obejrzymy go. Yeah, I would really recommend this is a great film, but if you want to know about Mr. Rogers, watch the documentary first. Yeah. It's important. There's nobody like this. There's nobody that I know like this. And because there's nobody else like this, it has the effect of making you realize, oh, this is possible. And it's very inspiring. Did you want coffee?
I'm okay today. I had a great dream. And actually I might have coffee. First I was this wasp is very persistent, isn't it? Oh. But now I'm realizing the energy from the dream is fake.
When did you wake up?
About half an hour before you came. And I was writing. Didn't wake up yet. Didn't wake up yet. Is that what you think?
No, Sebastian is telling me that he was writing when I came. He was in his room writing.
I'm not asleep so long as you think.
Were you writing about the dream?
Yeah.
Well, probably, if you've written about it, then yeah, the energy probably is fading very quickly.
It's
But
transferred.
the plot of the dream probably remains.
The plot's cool, but the neat part of dreams is who you are in dreams. And that's what gives you this energy when you wake up. That's different than energy that you can develop through the day. And usually it's hard to keep. I mean, sometimes you kind of wish you could keep who you were in that dream. I don't know if you've had that.
No, I've never had. Well, I don't know if I've never had, but I don't remember any dreams where I was someone I'm not. I may have dreamed an aspect of my
Sure.
of my character, and I wish that feeling of that energy would last longer, possibly.
So I think that would be saying the same thing. To me, it's like a different person, but to a lot of people, it would be a different aspect of the same person. It's a dream about Modern UN, which I haven't done in years.
I'm sorry, didn't you have that? I thought you had the 10 issue.
I did, yeah. The reason I looked under is
there another end piece?
I thought I saw a wasp.
Oh, that's
I was like, da, 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 da. But,
so it was a model UN.
it was a Model UN dream. We were having this conference, and I'm talking about my dream.
You had a dream last night.
Had a very interesting dream. I used to do these conferences, Model United Nations conferences, and basically what you did was you were a country, you were assigned a country, and there was a theme, something to develop a resolution to, and everyone is gathered in this room, and it's simulating the process of a United Nations conference. It's trying to simulate that process and have everyone be speaking, debating in the room, outside the room, writing a resolution, negotiating between the countries the resolution, and finally presenting the resolution and seeing if it will pass or fail.
Was there a Security Council?
That was not a detail that was important to
Oh yeah, because it's not in real life.
It's not that important, is it? I mean, there's Security Council conferences, but this was probably not. This was like a environment program conference or something. It was one of the what are they called? Like General Assemblies. And this particular conference was not going very well.
The one in your dream.
The one in my dream. Because of the host, meaning the chair. And the chair was the reason all of us had come to this conference. And she's actually someone whose podcasts I've been listening to for a while. Her name is Nora Bateson. And actually, she's one of the people I sent an email to looking for mentorship. Dr. Bateson. And
I haven't done that yet. Sorry.
That's fine. I sent it. And Paul helped me a lot for it, so don't worry about it now. Yeah.
You sent an email in the dream?
No. In real life, I've sent an email to this person because I admire the way she contextualizes certain problems, certain challenges like climate change. She has a very unique way of working her way through a discussion about them or a question about them. And it's a method that I look up to and that I can see it's something she has not only internalized for herself, but she runs this program called the Warm Data Lab, and this is something I want to be involved in because it's a method, a practiced method for getting people who have very different takes on the same issue to be in the same room together, and it's a method for them to actually communicate as opposed to just talk, in the way we often do when we don't know we're talking about the same thing, or we're concerned about the same thing, or we don't feel it that way. It's a way for us to feel that we're actually on the same page, even though we are seeing different perspectives of the same page. So in this dream, she was not a very interesting person. She was a very academic kind of bored person who was there hosting this and just wanted to get it over with. And it was a drag for all of us because we come for her, and to see how she would like foment us to take a different to bring something new, like first time to this type of conference that we'd done these before. How will she help us do it differently? And she was letting us down. And
did anybody challenge her?
Well, this is what this moment of the dream that's so memorable was about. There was this one girl who was really attractive, and she was attractive not only because of her looks, but because of how she played the room. She was not the way that Model UN people typically are, which is very egocentric and not defensive, but like confrontational. Confrontational, in a sense, it's not the right word. It's like type A, right? And I'm going to do this. I'm going to show this about me, that I can do this, and I need to keep hold of that. This girl was very good at making friends quickly, but knowing which people were worth promoting and worth help, like which people she should help them talk more in the conference, which people should be brought out more. And I was not one of those people at first. I was the way I usually was at these conferences, as I realize now. I was not fully bought into this egocentric view. I mean, I was trying to be something else. I was trying to do a resolution, but I was probably still trying to push my view of things a lot. Whereas she was letting the right people who had her views, she was kind of bringing them up as a team, so that one, she was closely connected to all of them, so she could, like they were working together. But two, they felt like there was a group forming, and it was powerful, and that kind of thing. And so, on the one side, I was kind of jealous, or like I wanted to be in this group. I wanted to bring something to this, which is cool, because that's not usually a feeling I got during the actual conferences. Usually it was, okay, all these people are we're all, myself included, we have no idea really about this issue, and so we need to quickly research this and quickly come up with the best ideas, kind of point forward. It was very crammed way of going about this.
In the Model UN, when did you get your portfolio? Did everybody get a portfolio?
Yeah, a week before, 2, something like that. And yeah, we're students, we're busy with other stuff, such. But
so ideally, would you have gotten a or something like that.
Ideally, I wouldn't have procrastinated on that. It was not something out of. Ideally, I would have developed a good way to do something like I did in high school. I did it better in high school because I spent time on them. But once I did, it meant that it was kind of internal to me, the issues and what different people were about in different countries. And so it was, I could focus on the room and the people. I could focus on the people, which is what you want to do. You don't want your attention taken up by what I don't know about this topic, and I need to show them that I know it, and I need to write it, and I need to write it faster than they find out. What is that? And then there was this moment where this girl,
Yeah, that's inside.
there was this moment where this girl said, there's in Montaigne, there's these, you can, what's the word again? Propose a 15-minute, like, it's not an amendment, obviously, the word's escaping me, a break. And we were in one of these breaks, and maybe we were 10 minutes in, and we were in this group, and this girl had been kind of stifling my attempts to do more speaking. Somehow, I don't know how. But now, she asked this question, where she said, does anyone know why Nora is being so typical about this? Because 5 minutes before, the host, the moderator, had suggested, okay, you guys all seem kind of lost on this, why don't you just write something about this and do it this way? It's been tried before, it's tried and true, and we'll just, do something like that. Something very typical, something that will make us feel like we wrote something and we don't have to feel guilty of trying.
Feel guilty of not trying.
Of trying and failing, right? Of thinking somewhere else. And so this girl who was kind of leading this group, but kind of from the back, she says, why is this host, does anyone know why this host is not being helpful at all? Is taking such a traditional approach to this conference? And I knew this was like my chance, because I kind of got why she was so bored. She'd probably done this many times before. She was a professor at this university, which is not who she is in real life, but this was the character she was in this dream, was this professor. And we were just finding this out. We thought, we went because we probably all heard her podcast or her interviews. And then we go to this university and she's hosting it. And then we find out she's a professor there. And that she's been there for a long time probably. And, you could build the backstory out for why she was acting this way. And being disappointed. And I said to the group of people, I know why she's being this way. And suddenly this girl was focused on hearing this. And she's like, all right, come outside. Let's talk about it. And so we go outside this fence, which is really weird. And suddenly we're in the school property of, like, the backyard of my primary school. And I sit down near this tree, but in the sun. And this girl's kind of like chuckling, like, why are you sitting down? And then she sits down, and then other people start coming, because we're not the only conference happening. I think we're the environment one, and there's a UNHCR one, there's a development program one, there's probably the Security Council. And somehow this girl has like all these scouts who or they're not scouts though, they're like friends she's made in the other rooms that are just now telling her how bad it is in the other rooms too. And so we're not really talking about this issue. And then other people from our conference come, and they're trying to figure out a way to do what Nora just suggested. Let's do this quickly. Oh, we should do this, and they're trying to work on that. Do a very standard resolution. She suggested
what
something.
Nora did.
Nora suggested.
Yeah. Right, sorry.
And Nora Bateson. Hopefully she's better. But this was beside the point, because why would we do that? Really, we have another 20 minutes. It's ours. And so, I said, I think I know why she's being this way. She's been a professor here 20 years. What has she been practicing? What has she been doing every time she does one of these? And just something that for some reason wasn't clear to the other people. I'm sure in a real situation, this would be kind of obvious to everyone. But I think everyone was still kind of starstruck and wasn't able to reconcile. And to me, it was like, oh, now I get her. She's just this professor at this university who's tired of her job, and she has to host this because she took it on. She agreed to take it on this year, and she's resigned to it, and she just wants it over. And
so you say this?
I say this.
Okay.
And I say, there's always these moments in these conferences, and usually it has to do with the members themselves, who are very deeply into acting like their countries, and so they're, fair enough, being faithful to the genre and recreating the impossibility of doing this and of doing anything interesting. And that's an important thing to practice in Model UN, is to become aware of obviously how hard this must be in real life, but at a very basic level, in the real world, they have, the people who are there speaking, but then they have each of those people who are diplomats of those countries. They have a lot of writers who are there behind the scenes, right? That's how it really works. And there's days of negotiation and writing and messages back and forth. It's very different. You can't do that in one day thing. But
there are people who are writing down what's being said and interpreting it at the same time.
Interpreting it, trying to get it in, trying to see, is this person suddenly possibly going to be swayed by this? Or should we be worried about them? Should we focus on them? Should we not? Are they in? Are they out? That's more what it's like. But here, the people who are speaking, are the people who are writing, are the people who are passing or failing.
So they're doing everything.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And we, it's our chance to do something that's actually worth reading. Even if it's not realistic, we could always work on realism later. Once we've written what should be done, we can not that it's not realistic technically, but politically not realistic that this country would back this or that. Once we've got the idea that eventually this country should move towards this and this country should be able to do that, we can work on what will make that feasible and likely in those countries. We didn't have the time for this one, but one of the big things I realize now that this dream made me realize in Model UN, the biggest issue was there was no progression of a topic or of a session after the session was over. It was over, it was written, passed or failed, and it was shelved. It was put away. This is how it is in real life. when I was in these conferences. And I think I think of the biggest issue we had as a club, and most of these clubs seem to have this issue, was retention. We have no issue attracting first years or second years. Holy crap. We have no issue with bringing people in, but after 1 or 2 years, people don't come back. They've done it. The only reason we found they would come back is we started doing parties, and because we started doing parties, we'd actually become friends, and then we wanted to keep spending time together. That was the only thing that kept us together. The group that I went skydiving with is from Mont UN. We all met there, and the only reason we're still in touch is because we actually bonded, not because of anything in the conference.
But I can understand. I mean, so you mean the retention would be, what would bring the retention?
Right.
If there would be some kind of further.
The problem
if
is,
you do the same thing a couple of times, then why do you want to do it again?
exactly. It's always the same thing. Why do it again? The problem.
On this party, did you have tea?
I know what you want, Dziadzio. You don't need to contrive a situation.
Co za subtelny dyplomata.
A,
Co za subtelny dyplomata.
You want more bread?
I don't think you.
More bread?
what?
More bread?
Well, I'll have one. This one here. O której mamy w czwartek? Czy to w czwartek jest? Nie wiesz jeszcze, tak?
Nie wiem. Starałem się znaleźć ten kawałek papieru, nie mogłem, także będę musiał zadzwonić.
A z Moniką się może skontaktowałeś?
Nie,
Też nie,
cholera,
tak?
nie, sorry.
Tak.
Zapomniałem. Zupełnie zapomniałem słonika.
Nie szkodzi.
Nie, muszę zapisać, bo zapomnę.
O, ty pójdź stąd, bo w końcu stracisz życie. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir. Good. The pack of wasps is gone.
how the dream have ended.
Well, we are having a discussion outside of the conference, and I'm telling them why this is proceeding in such a boring way, and everyone is bringing this up now. Everyone is saying how let down they are by how it's going, and as I'm saying this, there's an interesting thing that happens. I can feel the change in how people are perceiving me. Very strange, but it's strange because I haven't expressly paid attention to this in real life in these conferences. But in this moment, I notice how people are now listening. Jesus Christ, man. And come on, man. Come on. And I can tell that like everyone is looking at me, and now I'm no longer, before I was someone trying to put my ideas forward, and it was proceeding like any other conference. But now that I feel this change in how people are looking at me, like I know something, I realize that that's not who I am anymore. It's like now I'm someone who can make the last 20 minutes of this memorable. We can create something quickly that we can look back on. And we don't need to take the easy way out of another conference. And right when I realize that, and everybody is looking at me, I wake up. But what I was telling you is why would anyone come back, right? After a few times, if they're they would stay friends with each other, but none of us go to the conferences anymore. They're still happening. Some of us are still students.
Who organizes the conferences?
It's every year the leadership changes. We were the leaders once upon a time, then we passed it to someone else, and some of them became our friends.
So when you were the leaders, how would you organize the conference? Isn't it so I guess my final question is, isn't it up to the leadership to create a system that will work to promote some aspect, not just of allowing participants to imagine what a conference looks like, but actually teaching them something further?
It was. And
so what do you have to say for yourself?
This is what I have to say. I have to say that we got the social side going. It was not like that before. We were the second cohort. It had been started a year earlier. And a year earlier, the guy who was the leader now was just a newbie, right? The first year.
So who had organized it then?
A bunch of typical Type A Model UN people. Like accounting and financial management students, actually. People who are well organized, who knew how to do it, who liked it, but who had a certain view of it. They were, from the first conference I attended, they were saying, so the winner of this conference is going to get a chance to come with us to the Harvard Model UN. And maybe that word to attract a certain group of people. Jesus. They're terrible. Where's your swatter? Yeah. violence. It did attract a certain group of people, but it also lost those people because some of the older ones who had helped organize it the first year. By the second year, they were like, I have a damn master's degree in computer science. They were saying, why am I, this is so childish. People get older through the 4 years, and they change. The person I was in second year wouldn't have thought of this. But the person I was in second year did notice that these people aren't getting close with each other. They're uncomfortable, and so all we have two groups of people who come. They're all interested, but the first group are already type A people who know how to do this, feel comfortable doing it, and want to take over. They want to do it themselves. The second group are people who are curious, but they have no confidence. And that was our focus that year, was how do we get those two groups united in being people in these contexts together, not being machines and not being receptacles, but being so last night we had this party, we talked about all this deep stuff, which we always did at body-led parties. It's never typical. Deep personal stuff, deep political stuff, it all mixed in. But that was new that year. It wasn't happening that much before, and I think because it happened, I could tell that people who were less comfortable before were more, and people who were too comfortable before, not too comfortable, too sure of themselves before, were more respectful of other people not in a diplomatic sense, but in a I actually respect you because I talked to you last night and you're cool, and I was the vulnerable one that time. So that was our battle, and I did realize this particular aspect of Model UN 2 years ago, that retention was the issue. But this was 2 years after I'd left. It's been 4 years since I was one of the people leading it. And it kind of feels like, one of the coolest things about Harry Potter is that the story and the darkness and the characters and the complexity of it grows with the audience.
Yeah.
It's very sweet and childlike at first, like its readers. But as they're getting into their teenage years, so is he. And you feel that in the books. You feel, even though I hate the 5th book, it's almost like an embodiment of messiness. It's huge. There's a lot of just frustration with, why didn't he become a prefect? Why doesn't Dumbledore trust him? It's all this stuff where he might be the problem. And you really feel that these people reading it and the people writing it are growing, or the people in it are growing together. And I think of how to do that with this. And I think with this dream, I got a lot of ideas for that, which is annoying, but it's annoying because I'm gone. I probably don't have a chance to go back there, and part of me really wants to now. I want to, but maybe it doesn't have to be there. But that's why it's annoying, because it's done. But I just think of a way for it to be more about the people who are there the first year. What's going to be, okay, so you did the first year, you got comfortable with yourself and with doing this, and you met these people that are cool. But if you were to repeat that, it would have run its course already. It needs to be the second season. You can't just keep playing the first season again and again. And so, what builds on that? If it was a club that instead of catering to it, and I know why it does it, why maybe it feels it needs to, it's because people go on co-op, people graduate. So how can we keep having members? We need to keep having new members. So then the focus is on them. They're new. They need the basic stuff. That's good. but
there's no focus on returning members.
So they don't keep
There's
returning.
nothing for them.
There's nothing new for them. There's stuff for them, but it's the same stuff. And so I was thinking, like, how do you, okay, why are we shelving these things we created indefinitely? Or, definitely, sorry. Why are we just putting them away? Yeah, they were rushed. Some of them turned out, some of them didn't, but aren't you kind of curious to see how you could make them better?
I don't understand. How would you make it better?
You would make it better by
looking at the resolution, looking at last year's resolution, and
last year we made this resolution. This is where the UN is now, is where that last resolution brought us. These countries did agree to this, but now we create a new scenario. This one wasn't good at implementing it. Because if you remember, the guy there last year wasn't really up to it. He didn't want to do it, or he was incompetent, or he was a newbie, and you can create stories behind why now this country is like struggling with this. This country has backed out. This country is still in, but they're not actually doing it. They're like Canada with the Kyoto Protocol. And that would be most of the countries, right? Is like expose them to that reality that most of these things don't get followed well by the people who actually it would help the most if those people follow them. And then what you do, okay, this conference is not going to be about passing a new resolution. It's going to be about working on each of those countries and working with them specifically, one-to-one, to develop plans for how they can make this a livable reality one day. This thing that we aspire to. How does it actually, concretely? Last year we just wrote a cute thing about how they would do this, and they supposedly, it didn't happen. Okay, so this year, didn't happen. How much can we find out about the actual situation in these countries so that we can get an embodied sense of what the leaders there might be going through in terms of the conflicts, like conflicts of priorities, and then what is actually feasible for those countries to move in this direction, maybe half as much.
But to create that kind of situation, you would have to have a number of organizers who would be willing to it's sort of like role-playing. You create scenarios.
Which we had already. That was what everyone was a country.
Yes, but they had no. Yes, I'm talking just about organizing. So there would have to be a group of people. I mean, how many countries are in this?
Depends on how many people signed up for the conference.
Okay, so how many generally signed up?
20.
20 people. Okay, so you'd have 20 countries.
Yeah.
So then, did people choose countries, or the chosen to choose?
We're
countries
assigned
or chosen
countries.
assigned? So, in the following year, you would probably have, let's say this is the second year, how many of the participants would be people who had done it already?
10.
So half.
Yeah, maybe 7.
Half of them were new, half of them were repeating. So you assign new roles to the ones that are repeating, something new for them to do, something different for them to focus on. But you're taking last year's resolution. How reliable was last year's resolution? Is it something that can be?
It's very idealistic in the positive and negative sense. In the positive sense, it lays what we should aspire to. So it has those things, but it doesn't show how. That's what the focus is.
So you would have to have a group of organizers who would know who had signed up way ahead of time, who would then create scenarios for some of the countries that the returning members would be the ones who were assigned those countries where things had changed in some way or somehow things needed to go the extra step.
Yes. We would give more responsibility to the returning members. You're back this year. Half the people this year are new. You're going to be instrumental in showing these people the complexity of this by taking on these difficult roles of these countries who you're going to need to do a lot of preparation, research to know who you are, who you're acting, and why for that specific year we actually can't be focusing on that. And you're going to push.
What do you mean for that specific year?
You know, it's an election year, so we can't be thinking about this. We're thinking about this because this is the plan. And you know, these little nuances that will make the new members. It might be a 2-day event, or it might be a term-long. See, the thing with these is people only have so much time to dedicate. But I think part of why they only have so much time to dedicate is it's not that compelling. You know, as anything that becomes like way more compelling, suddenly you make time. You just do, and the people who are compelled by it make time. And so that's time for preparation, but that's also time for the actual conference, because in the actual conference, you want to show these new members like a realistic vision of what it would be like to confront these countries. Not these leaders and not all the ambassadors' specific personality traits, but maybe that too. And you want to, as a returning member, you want to really bring forward your idiosyncrasies of that country, maybe of that person. You can really go in on creating something that's difficult to deal with. It doesn't matter if it's how that ambassador today actually is. It matters that the people who are new obviously are going to run into a rough time. But that's the training, see? That's just get away. That's the thing that is the initial shock. And that's the thing you come back to the second session, whether it's the same day, whether it's a different day. And you say, okay, now all of you new members, maybe actually even the old members can help with this. Now we're stepping out of our roles. And we all observed what happened. And probably not much was changed. So what do you think, new members, like what's going on with who you were working with? You were a UN diplomat assigned to this country to help them increase their applied ratification of this resolution, and it probably fell through the cracks. What did you notice about it? What did you notice? What do you know about their situation? Have you done any research in the last week? Now let's actually do more of that research. Let's pair up again, but instead of that person who's a second year, who's experienced being an opponent now they're actually these are now two people working on this one case, the experienced one and the beginner one. And then we have periods where they're working together, and they're maybe the experienced one is telling them about this country and what it's going through this year and what it's why it's not focusing on this. And I mean, that could be a year-to-year thing, but it's also more a general thing of, you know, UAE has a lot of oil and why would they stop using that or something like that, where it's a fundamental problem. And for those fundamental problems that a lot of countries might share, UAE and Canada, then those people get together and into medium-sized groups. And on those issues, those people are going to be working on those issues together because they're the ones facing them. or someone who's facing more deforestation side things is going to be getting together, right? And so then you have medium-sized groups form. And then you have a more cohesive thing where maybe that's the third out of 4 sessions. And that third session is, how does all of this fit together? Is the first half. And so the whole resolution, what are specific things that, and maybe the UN actually doesn't do this. Maybe in UN resolutions it's kept as general as possible to allow the most benefit of the doubt, to allow the most flexibility and chance that at least they'll get in the mood to try something, which is already such a struggle for so many countries. Maybe that's how it is in real life, but we maybe can do a bit better. We've seen that already, right? That's what it was last year. Last year it was, here's a very general thing that was idealistic, but also there were compromises made, and now we see a year later what the results of that thing are. Next to nothing. So now instead of this being only like a UN simulation thing, which is what it's called, mono-UN, great. That was the thing a lot of people had as a problem with this in conference and in preparation. They would have an issue of, this is not something the UN would do. Which is a very hard thing to deal with because, on the one hand, it's true. You don't want to be idealizing this. But on the other hand, it just creates the same scenario again and again. You get in that room, and the Security Council is always going to change everything. And they have their priorities. They feel powerful because they know who they are. And if they don't, they soon find out because other people want to work with them. It gets to their head, even these people acting this. It might not get to their head directly, but it's like, oh, I can just do whatever I want. And it's a different mentality that I'm sure is out there. But I'm also sure that there's more that we need to practice because what we're doing is not just preparing ourselves to understand how difficult this is. What we're doing is something that like the UN doesn't do. And that's, or maybe it does do it, but there's an aspect of this that's going to be very realistic, but there needs to be an aspect that's a different kind of training. What if these people could actually be on board? Whereas in real life it might feel kind of hopeless and decades away. What if, let's simulate that right now today, if we find a way to propose specific plans for the conversion of, Alberta over the next 30 years to more renewable sources of energy, maybe 70-30, then they will actually start working on this. It's important to do this for members too, because it's not just important to show them the reality, it's important to remind them of what they need to, like, how hard it would actually be, let alone the politics, how hard it actually is to focus on the concrete solution. But that's never something you're going to do if you're only focused, if the politics stops you right away in that conference setting. So if the politics dictates from the first setting that there's going to be this amount of change and decorum, but no more, that's it. And we don't get to practice what next. Who cares if the next ever happens? It's good that we practice the on the ground side too, because it's a different aspect of this work that maybe is done more in real life by companies or is done more by NGOs. But it's good that they're exposed to doing that, because not only does it give them a sense of possibility for this actually happening, it then forces them to think, well, how the hell? Once you see it's possible, then you have to face how can it be done. Whereas before it's impossible, so we just have to compromise on something, and it stops there. It's a different threshold, and it's a different priority. And so then the fourth day of the conference, maybe on the fourth week, is, okay, we put all this together. now the experienced members go back to their roles of being, bitchy, idiosyncratic diplomats, and the new members bring this to them. And then there's negotiation. And maybe it's all thrown out. Like, it's possible. And you have to be willing to play that role. But maybe a lot of it's thrown out and this is kept. And it depends how prepared you've made yourself as a new member to show the possibility of this concretely and in a way that's relatable to that character. And it depends how much you've prepared yourself as a returning member to embody who you are, but also what you could go towards, possibly what you could be swayed towards, and what you could. That's it.
How in your experience, how much do participants adhere to their role and to the actual reality of what is being tried to be resolved?
Really depends on the room. So I'll tell you, depends on the type of person, and it depends on their experience, and it depends on that day. Those are the three things it depends on.
So there's a variety.
There is. There's people who are new, who don't really know what they're doing, and either they'll quickly learn to be to get the idea, the stereotype of what their country is in world news, and to adhere to that. So they'll do that. Or they'll be more easily swayed by what's going on in that room and who's leading and who's making things possible or impossible and going with one of those. So it depends on their predisposition to want to be leaders or followers that day. And it depends on their experience, whether they know a lot about the country or not.
And why do people do this? Why do people do?
Are we still in the dream world?
We're talking about how to improve model United Nations.
About what?
How to improve model United Nations.
I see. And that is in a dream world.
That's in the real world.
Reminded me a Jewish joke.
Let's do it.
There was a guy walking with his little son on the street, and the boy says, "Dad, what would happen if we had a car?" "Well, it's true, like if we had a car, we could drive to the seaside. We could be sitting on the beach and enjoying the breeze.
Nice, relax.
Dad, and what would happen if we had an airplane?" "Oh, if we had an airplane, we could fly to the island, beautiful exotic island, and there we'll sit under the palms." "Dad, and what would happen if the car ran over the mother?" "Oh, don't be a dreamer."
Don't do that. Too cruel. Why do they come? Again, there's a variety, and that's what's interesting, because that's what was interesting about the social events. Was that would change why they would come. They might originally come to be a certain way, to let out a certain side of themselves, to learn something. There was that. So there was, usually the dichotomy was, I'm here to do this, or I'm here to try this / learn from this. So,
and forgive me, I'm going to interrupt you a few times.
Good.
What would people want to learn from this?
They'd want to learn about issues, politics, different countries. They'd want to learn like public speaking skills, debate skills. So they'd either want to learn skills or realities.
So it wasn't so much related to learning a lot about the actual United Nations itself and how it functions.
No. Which
So it's like a role play game.
it's a role play game at its best. At its best, you know why I say that is, even though it wasn't about learning much about the UN, you know, you do learn those. We're talking about what was this club about? Because this is not just in the dream. This is in the real world, right? What was it about? Did you know this? Did you think it was just in the dream?
What?
Did you think this was only in my dream?
Well, that's what I understand.
This is something that I participated in for 3 years.
I see.
Have you never heard of a model United Nations?
I told them about that.
At university, they simulate some aspects of the United Nations. Depending on how many participants there are, each participant represents an ambassador from one particular country, and they sit in a general assembly style and try and come to some resolution on a particular issue.
So it is a simulation of the some United Nations.
Yeah.
I see.
Yes.
And Sebastian has taken part in this, and he has some ideas on how to make it better relative to his experience
In my dream.
Well, but your experience, yeah.
But in the real life too. Because it has, I guess, haunted me for a few years that when the people we would have come the first year and the second year, by the time it was the third year, completely different people. All of the old people, or almost all, were not coming anymore. And this is a real shame to me because I understand why they're not coming. They're not coming because it's always the same. It's a different topic, it's a different issue, it's a different day, different people, but at the end of the day, it's always formatted the same way. There will be different speeches given, short speeches, then we will launch into an area of this conference, this subtopic, that subtopic. We will dedicate 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. We will have some breaks in between, negotiating, meeting people. We will then, there might be some scandal and some fun along the way, but it always starts and ends the same way.
But what was the purpose of the conference?
This is what we were talking about. The purpose for the people joining, what they wanted from it was either to learn some skills like debating or speaking in public.
For those who took part in it, yes?
Took part in it.
So that was to develop
those skills, or to develop a better understanding of certain issues in the present or in history, global issues. And the purpose for us along the way was also to expose them to some of the realities of negotiation, especially in a United Nations setting.
Who was organizing this?
Students.
Students. Yes?
Students.
I see. So that was sort of a way of developing those who took part to developing their skills, their thinking, their approach,
sure. All of this.
I understand. Yeah.
And we always had two different groups of people in my head. We had the people who were either because they were experienced in this or because they were very strong personalities, the people who wanted to come and to dominate. They wanted to come, they wanted to convince all these people, and they wanted to pass something that they wanted. Sometimes they were more anarchistic. They were anarchists and they wanted to destroy the world at the same time. Sometimes they were more diplomats and they wanted to bring the world together. But there was that type of person. And then there were the people who, either because they were new, because they didn't have much experience debating and public speaking, they were more shy, more reserved, but they were there because they wanted to either develop those skills or they wanted to learn about these issues. They were curious. And it was always the struggle to bring those people into the same reality. That was our struggle. And that's normal. That's often how it is, right?
Yes, and I think that seems to me that's a very, very useful project or whatever what you called it.
Sure.
Is it project or is it
a club?
A club.
But purpose. This purpose to bring them together was our purpose the year that I was one of the leaders. That was what I was mainly concerned about. Maybe not in the same terms as I'm telling you now, but I was saying that people come and often they seem bored. If they're not confident or experienced, they seem bored. You see them tired by 2/3 of the way in and they've given up already. And how to change that? We started having social events, parties, different things like this. And it really seemed to change for some of the people. Some of them, maybe it wasn't their thing, but a lot more of the people who used to be shy and used to be have a hard time integrating were now connected to these other people who were very sure of themselves. And the people who were sure of themselves, in turn, were a bit more caring and respectful of the other people. And that was more of a team effort as opposed to a game to destroy you. So this was, I liked this change a lot. This was good. But the problem I noticed once I left, every year the leadership would change. I was the leader, one of the leaders one year, and the next year I wasn't, right? That's the way it worked. That's good. The problem here was I noticed that the people from our year or earlier would stop coming once they were in third year university, fourth year, fifth year. And there's many reasons to think that that's possible. I first noticed this in my first year, and at the time I thought, why would they leave? This is so much fun. This is great. We get to meet all these people. We get to have these fun times together. But as I got older, once I had left, I realized how childish it also was. And how all the time it was always the same. It was this game. And even though we had broken some of the barriers between the confident people and the novices, it would always come back to this game of who is going to take over the room this time. That's the first issue. And the second issue was it would always be that way. There was, even though the topics were different, the conferences were essentially the same, just about different things. So you get bored. You know how it's going to happen. You know the limits. You get used to it. And the only thing you're left appreciating are the friends you made along the way, which is good. But that's it. And now you will maybe stay in touch with those friends, maybe not, but you will not keep going to these conferences that are childish and that are always the same. So what we are talking about is how to make this different. How to make it so that people who come the first year get a very different experience the second year. Right now it's catered towards beginners. Because of the university system and people are always graduating, people are going on the internship in other cities, they can't join, people get busy and so on. It's assumed that this is a first and second year enterprise and maybe a few upper year students. But because it's assumed that this is a sad reality, there's nothing done to try to test the certainty of that reality. There's nothing done to try to cater to people who are always seeing the same conference. There's nothing done to change their experience of this. And essentially, we were talking about a different format that could be used in order to present to everybody a more a different and maybe more concrete experience of the negotiation, but at the same time present to the returning members a different challenge, a deeper challenge, a challenge that ties back to what they did last year and continues on it, so that instead of always they are basically watching the same movie, now it's like the seasons, the episodes in the different TV seasons, and it's progressing, and they're progressing, and depending on the people we have there, we are enabled to build on what we did last time, instead of always starting from the beginning. And I feel kind of wishing that I could do that.
You're wrong, but this kind of let's say discussions or debates, they develop the people, they develop personality, develop the skills of communications and so on. But the subject, even if it is a different subject, there is no more, for those people, there no more motivation to go and, because I feel already developed on that. So why should I spend time discussing with the new guys the topics which are it's what I understand. It's sort of academic approach to the motivation debate and things like that. But then you have to have an actual something to which drives you, something which demands those people who pass through that, who gain those skills of debate and so on. They will probably be able to use it in life when the real problems come in, whether that is in their life in the company, in the country.
I'm so surprised you don't have a
and so on. So it's sort of, to me, it's sort of academic.
No, it's
academic.
It's an observation.
Yes, well, you see, it turns out we already have a mechanism for having a continuation and a building on that subject, because the amount, when you have 20 people in a room who are each acting different countries, the amount of depth and concreteness, but also concreteness and subtlety and realism that you can achieve in 4 hours of debate and discussion between 20 people is very low.
Day after day, it's been really
But that's all theoretical.
But it's not, because we
are not
no, I know. So
you're assuming something.
Of course we are assuming. That doesn't mean it's a theory. Of course everything's a theory. But theories can be made more real. And the way they are made more real is by understanding more about the situation. And what we are creating here is a resolution, the way that the United Nations create the resolution. So for example, what we were saying was
magic.
There's a way, imagine the first year you have a conference about climate change and what each country is going to do for climate change.
I like
Great. And
and you come up
static
with a
weather.
certain
That's what I hated
resolution,
about California.
we will all do this
We had a drought.
within
We
10
had a
years,
drought
blah, blah,
there.
blah, blah, blah.
It was 4 years.
Now,
no rain
what
at
is
all.
the likelihood
I'd-
in the real
I'd
world
pedal my bike
that
out
any
to
of these
the
countries
cliffs
actually
over the
follow
ocean
these
and
resolutions?
see these clouds dropping rain into the water?
On the nation,
Whoa.
resolution in the country, you have those people who come from the United Nations and say now we make the resolution
Yeah, I
that,
missed it.
that we will.
I missed it.
The Parliament has to approve it.
Yeah.
Parliament has to say
But
it.
then
Now,
the wet years,
the whole country will be working
like
toward
here.
this resolution. Or they would
Exactly.
say,
Spiders
well,
would
that's
come out
fine.
this big,
Well,
seriously,
you talk
big
to
spiders.
Yes.
Legs
what is
big fat
incentive for?
spiders.
Yeah,
Making
exactly.
spider webs
So there's a
in the wet
political
years.
conflict
In
in
the
the
dry years,
country.
they-
Now
Not only
still
not
exist.
political,
In the wet years, they would come out,
it
they were-
is practical.
it's
They
practical.
weren't very aggressive.
Because
they would just
you have to
make
pass
It's
the
a practical
laws,
life.
you have to assign the
nets
funding,
for
you
their
have to
victims, and
convince
that was
people
it.
in the
If you
parliament,
touch
all
her-
this stuff. Cool.
Oh, they just
So now imagine
no, don't hurt me, don't hurt me.
this is
I'm
what
right here.
these members
Exactly.
who came the first year, they come back for a second year. And instead of finding a brand new topic, what they find is this year
I was
we are going to focus on the same topic.
100-year-old house,
The reason we are going to do this
redwood house,
is because that resolution we passed last year,
by
it didn't go
termites.
so well. We are now 5 years later, and some of these countries were able to achieve some of these
Yes,
things.
I understand.
So we create this scenario.
This is all academic.
It's not a drought yet.
What do you
That's
mean
academic,
academic?
which I call it. So that is
but
for
I mean,
no,
it's
those
a
mega drought.
participants.
No, well,
learn.
that's what
Yes.
they've been describing
Learn.
a lot. That this is
So
a-
they
this is
will be
as
in
all
the
the makings
actual
of a
life.
mega drought.
They will have
Makings of
skills
the-
of talking.
Yeah,
it's not a
those are-
mega drought yet. Yes, they have been talking about 10 years.
So that's
Yeah.
what you mean. I understand what you mean academic.
So-
You mean the actual product itself is not valuable. It is the process that they are learning.
Sure,
Yes,
they got
that's
out of the
fine.
drought
What I'm
a
saying
couple years
is
ago.
the academic
And
this
it's
year
lasting.
should be
When the
very
rains come,
different
they come
than the
for a
one
couple of
last year.
years.
Otherwise, the
But
people
only in
who
the
were there
winters, of
last
course.
year
I
will
mean,
not
they
come
last-
back.
sometimes they
But
last
if it
through
was
until-
different,
through June, maybe.
you could actually
But,
create
when
something
they come,
more
you
that's still
have to-
academic but more
every-
realistic. And
everything's
now
been
what
lying
I didn't
fallow
tell him, but I'm
for,
going to tell
for
you,
several months
which
now.
is my
Like,
idea
well,
for the
2 or
third
3
year.
months in the summertime.
So the second year,
With
you
dust
work on
covering
maybe
the
20
fields,
countries.
But the
who
tarantulas loving it.
They were not able
And
to
then the
do a
rains
good
come.
job of this
And everything
resolution.
turns
And there
emerald.
are 20 people playing these countries. And they are returning
That's really
members.
special. And the
They are
rivers
experienced,
swell up
and they have signed up because they want a chance to
A friend of
develop
mine and
what
I
they did last
put
year.
on some wetsuits.
Because they're
And we
interested
took
in
the car
how
with a
to
couple
make
of
it better. Because
inflatable
it was not
tubes,
very
giant
good last
inflatable
year.
tubes.
It
And
was
the
not.
river was
It was very idealistic,
Just
so on,
jump
so
on
as it often is.
Travel
So,
almost. It's
that's
about
what
a
they do
45
the
minute
second
trip.
year, is they
45
get into
minutes in
these
a rough
characters
current.
who there's
wonderful.
very specific reasons why these countries were not
Why a
able to
wetsuit?
implement.
Because it was cold.
And the conference this second year is about that, and how do we create something much more
It's an experience.
like how do we
No.
design more practical
it's a
solutions
neoprene,
for these
uh-huh.
countries? How do we
Yes,
focus on
I
that?
understand what you're saying. It's
Or
all
whatever that
depends.
stuff is.
I don't
I have
know
a
who
chunk
was
of it in my
organizer
You
of
don't know
this.
Neil
It
Breen.
was at the
Neil?
at the
Oh,
university.
sorry,
Yes.
Okay.
So there must have been some professors, some teaching body who had an idea of this conference.
No,
Who was this?
this is students.
So students. So those,
They had the idea. of
they
this.
probably ran out of the ideas.
Well, they.
That's why you don't have the.
Oh, I know why we don't have this. I know why. I'm saying what it could be, and you say it's very academic because the product of this is confined to not being useful to anyone. It's just for those people's learning process.
Sure.
That's true. Now, what I'm thinking is for the third year.
That's somebody sneezing.
Either that or it's on.
So the third year.
Wow.
So we are laughing because someone is sneezing extremely
I've never
loudly.
heard that from
Was it wrong?
There's someone sneezing very, very loud.
God, I'm glad I'm not related to that person or living anywhere near.
Corvus.
We're living close enough.
So there,
in many of the classes that I have taken part in, actually not many, but a few, we have had the guest lecturer who used to work in the United Nations. For example, I took a course about indigenous, so like the First Nations, the culture of First Nations in the development process. Their role in development, the way they've been excluded, the way they've found a way to have their position integrated, and different things like this. You know the First Nations? Yes. Yes. So I took this class, and one of our lectures was a guest lecture from a colleague of our professor, an old friend who worked on this very famous United Nations resolution on indigenous rights in terms of land use, in terms of environmental standards, things like this. And he came online and gave the lecture talking about his experience in the decade of creating this resolution. All of the negotiations, all of the times it almost failed, all of the wording, the specific words that certain ambassadors wanted changed, and then when the ambassador changed 4 years later, the other ambassador was okay with it, or vice versa. All these little details that you could not imagine, that you would have to live in order to understand. And what I'm thinking is, how do we, there would probably be a possibility to send these guest lecturers, these people who used to work there, to send them our document. In fact, they probably would be, some of them are retired now. They are giving guest lectures because they have this experience and they're interested in helping young people learn about this. They would probably be interested in commenting on which parts of what we have created after 2 years of work, which parts of that are realistic, unrealistic, what challenges we didn't consider, why this country would probably be a bigger issue than all these details that now is a different type of academic experience, because now you're more and more connecting it to what people have already tried. Real people who are working as diplomats and as writers in the United Nations have already tried to create to address these issues. So you're connecting these students over the years more and more to that reality. That is the idea that, to me, is the only thing that would make it, as these people are getting older, they're thinking more about their future and what are they going to work on, and what is worth working on. And the only way that something fantasy like this simulation remains relevant to those people as they get older and more mature is through connecting it more to the real world and what has already been tried, and why, the gaps, that gap between, okay, you wrote this, but there's nowhere near enough detail about this, or there's too much detail about this, and in a real resolution this would never happen. And that might be disheartening, but it would also teach you another level of this process, which is, okay, if the United Nations is not going to go into this detail about how this country can transition away from fossil fuels, if they're not able to feasibly do that because of politics, who is going to do that? Are there NGOs doing that? Maybe I really care about this issue, and maybe the reason I'm involved here is because I want to learn how to talk about this issue and how to think about this issue and how to negotiate, and I want to learn the intricacies. And if that's the case, I'm now realizing the limitations of this system that I thought was what I was going to go into. And maybe I still will. Maybe I will still try. Maybe I will find a way to work in part of it that is actually has been quite successful in the past. Or maybe it will help me change my career more towards working in the NGO or for the business. It's things like this because, for example, I'm quite cynical about the United Nations, but I wasn't always, right? And so part of what was interesting about this process was it was a practiced way of having a click that certain things are not possible and certain things are possible through this mechanism. And what are those things? And I remember in that class I was telling you about, we had a project, and I was working with two other people. And one of them had no idea that the things that are passed in the United Nations are not binding.
Yeah.
He was totally shocked by that, and it was something, it was cool because we were both, the other two of us, we had done Model UN, and he hadn't, and we happened to all be in this class. And I knew the other girl from like first year, from another class, and then Model UN briefly, and hadn't met her since, but I didn't know him. And we were all working on this project together, and it was a big shock to this guy that this actually, to him, it was like, oh, so we are just writing this for nothing.
That's what it is.
So it should be that. And this is something that maybe if he hadn't taken this class and been in this project, he would have pursued a career in this and been unhappy.
It's so unhappy.
You mean none of this? So sign this. You agree that none of this is binding, including the signature. So people. We have these dreams about the news we hear in the world, and before we actually dig into it and maybe try our hand at practicing a version of it, we don't understand what is and what is less possible in this reality. And basically, what I'm saying in how this club could be better is it would be better if it gave its members a lot more clarity on how they want to pursue the things they are really passionate about. They might have this dream that it's through the UN. They might find that dream to be made concrete and real and possible through these conferences. Or they might find it to be absolutely the opposite. And they need that now. They need to have that realization younger, because one, it will be less painful. And because two, they have more time to regroup. They have more time to find other ways that are more, maybe going to have a better impact. And they have more time to change the course of their life.
Who administered the UN model UN?
Who administered?
Was there a faculty that it was part of? East of Conflict Studies?
No, I mean, it was in, we often invited guest professors from politics, from peace and conflict. Actually, none from PAX. Too bad. There was, so it was through Feds. Feds, you have to go through Feds to run a student club. So it was just a student club. There was no actual.
It shouldn't be just a student UN club. It should be a mediation club. It should be a club where people learn how to develop skills in negotiating and develop the ability to listen and to develop consensus.
Yeah, and not just fall into this game where because we know each other, we can allow each other certain things that are not realistic, or that if you train that way, you wouldn't know how to deal with a real conflict. You know what I mean? Yeah, I agree, and I think it should be better integrated with. The problem is we're all students, and especially when you're a younger student who tends to still want to be a leader in one of these things, you can want all you want. You're very procrastinating often. You're very taken away by other classes, other things in your life.
Oh yeah,
You
of
end up-
course. Just like
that's-
any other club, it would
any
be
other
a club, so people do it voluntarily
I
because
love
they
that
have some
t-shirt.
interest.
I do too. It's great.
Yeah.
Bravo, Gabriel. Yeah, it should. I mean, often the guests we had, it was only as a kind of intro speech. It was like, as members of and it wasn't always that annoying, but it was always very. There's no conflict. There was no. It was almost self-congratulatory. It was, you guys are all here, you're the leaders of tomorrow. It was substanceless. Is not provoking.
At the university level, there was no. You remember Gabriel took part in FedProb.
Yes.
There was nothing like that.
Well, we made a model parliament. Yusuf and 10 other people, and 9 other people, and we started this. We did it for 1 year, and then the second year, leadership changed and failed.
A model parliament.
So it's
A
similar.
federal parliament.
Passing a bill into law. That process. And it was neat because because we did it from scratch, and we actually did it pretty well. And but again, it was a 1-year thing. It was a one-time, and it was only one conference that year. It's
And
a
how many
big
people participated?
40.
So all of them played members of parliament? Or some
They
of them
no,
played
no, they all played.
members of the
They didn't
government?
play specific members of parliament, but they did play minister of this, critic of that. You know, there were independents, shadow minister, and so there was that. There was different parties, everything. It was pretty realistic in the sense of, and so was Mod UM, by the way, in the sense of, speaking time and gavel stuff, and so all that procedural stuff was well respected in both. But the actual substantive stuff, the substantive difficulties, was not well represented in either, because of the limitations that we accepted and didn't focus on. We came in accepting and signing on to certain like compromises, and
because
as you do as a
you don't
student,
have that
you're
much
new
time
and
to
you don't have that much time, but of course, as soon as you tell yourself you have not that much time, it becomes harder to get it done. Whereas what I mean is,
Well, I don't mean that way. I mean, when you
No, I
say
know what
procedural, I mean, they generally a session in the United Nations would not sit once or twice
No.
in order to resolve an issue.
it would be over years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have years, but
No.
maybe you would do something like this over. But what's people's incentive to spend a couple months doing
Right.
this?
It
Right?
can't.
There has to be
It has to
another
be something
aspect to
so much more engrossing.
Well, I think it could be something
Could be.
put on between a couple faculties that deal with some of these issues, where it would be a course. It's part of a course. And
Some people, so actually 1 year we got it approved as an element that in order to get part of your credit for a course, you had to either do this or you had to come to one of our conferences. And so some of our people were through that. What would be cool is to do that with like engineering students.
why would that be cool?
Because I know Paul, and Paul is a geoscientist, and Paul and I have endless interesting discussions about the engineering mentality and how often the engineering mentality, a certain mentality that's developed through that seems to be common in people working at INAC,
What's that?
Indigenous and Northern Affairs, Canada. certain people working in negotiation or in approval processes for projects, mining or different projects in First Nations land. This whole idea of not talks, but not mediation, but maybe mediation. But there's a term like we're gonna host this number of like something like that. So historically, obviously, people have had, usually it's ceremony. Yeah, you have this meeting, and yeah, we're gonna note what you say, but nothing's done with that. And that's now. It used to be like this whole wish I remembered the term. This whole process that now is more common in terms of involving First Nations communities in the projects that are going to happen or could happen on their land. This whole thing used to be much worse, and even now it's not great. But and so he notices that people who have a very scientific orientation are very bad at listening because they come in with this, and the mentality in engineering is this is a technical problem with a technical solution. This needs to be, we need to make sure that, and the technical problem is the environmental restrictions. We need to make sure that they're abided by, and we need to make sure that the project fulfills that and doesn't break out of that. But beyond that, that's already been told to us by our superiors. We come in, we know what this is, and we just need to check. We need to check different things scientifically, and we'll be done. So the whole human aspect of guiding people through. Meanwhile, if you're a person living there, who you probably know that these things tend to go worse than scientists promise. There's leaks. There's 10 years later. There's a lot of cancer in this community. The fish aren't edible anymore. This happens all the time. So you know this historically.
A natural progression.
You don't trust this process. You don't trust that these people are and meanwhile they come and they're, as he describes it, the engineers keep to themselves. They do their report and they go back.
The process is very symbolic.
Very symbolic, and at best, or at most, it's very symbolic, and it's very because of that, it suffers. Not just the people there suffer, but it underestimates the difficulty of. No, it underestimates the difficulty of doing such a project right, which is possible, but harder than people are willing to work for it. And it underestimates the value of listening and not collaborating, but engaging people who live locally in the way they're going to meet this process.
And how the process is going to affect them and mitigating those effects.
And how that negotiation is likely going to reduce their actual costs in the long run of whichever company is building this, because it will, when people actually listen that way and because often when the discussions do happen at a level beyond symbolism, and now some of them are, depending on it really depends on the engineers or the consultants hired to go do it. That's what he's saying. And he's saying when it's really good consultants, suggestions end up being made that 10 years later avoid huge, costly problems for insurance companies, for whoever's going to pay for the cleanup, for whoever's going to get sued. Huge things are avoided just through that. And yet there's this old school mentality in a lot of his colleagues, which he used to have, where I know what the solution is. I know it already. and I know what we're gonna do. You come in with that, not being receptive, and you're setting yourself up for, or you're setting yourself and people 10 years down the line for a lot of consequences.
And of course, it affects those people much more than it affects you.
Yeah, you're on to something else. You're near retirement by then. So he says this. He used to go to Waterloo, and a lot of people talk about like the engineering, I guess, superiority mentality in Waterloo, especially, but in general. And it's very exclusive. All this, the co-ops go to Google.
I remember seeing a hydrogen-powered car there.
We went to see it together.
Well, that's right.
Huh. So, Paul right now is working a lot on how to nip that in the bud in the start. There's a certain. It's not like everyone who come. Just like, think about defunding the police and the institutionalized problem that seems to be in the police force, where a higher proportion of people who either come there or to maybe exert a certain type of power, or people who often the people who go to the police force. Just think of who is attracted by that career. Maybe it's a necessity, and maybe your family always did it, and most police men or women don't end up being like bad people or whatever. But there seems to be a lot.
And they
just
go
like
in for the best intentions.
Often,
but
often the ones who do are trained by or get to interact long enough with people who aren't.
Who are part of a culture that has certain negative things.
And that has kind of risen.
Well, like
and
that
that's training.
killing of George Floyd. Chauvin was the man who
stepped on.
Who stepped on him, but he was also the officer in charge, and the other people
were observing. That's exactly what's in my head.
Okay, so the two of them were rookie cops.
They were rookie cops.
And they were following orders.
And they were learning.
Right.
Right? They were
and
learning.
One of them, in fact, asked, shouldn't we take his heart rate or his pulse?
So imagine you're in that situation. You call. And, if this hadn't
it all falls on him.
If this hadn't blown up.
And that other guy from the Vietnamese name, that other officer.
I don't know their names.
But if this hadn't blown up,
then what would they have learned?
Yeah.
Right? This is another case that was maybe not great handling of it, but this is what you have to do. At best, that's how it's told to you.
Yeah,
or shown to you.
It's a killing culture.
Yeah, and meanwhile, 5 years ago, I saw this video of this man in the UK with this huge knife, just slashing at these policemen, and they're all darting, moving, swaying around him, and they've surrounded him. They have shields. They are moving, waiting for him to get tired, and then they pin him down and arrest him.
Yeah, just
smart, because they've been trained differently.
Smart and not lazy.
Well, but that's a training
thing.
It's
training. There's a lazy kind of mentality.
There is.
That's what I'm talking about. Is they don't train.
Right.
They don't train in martial arts. They're all fat and
but not even martial
mentally.
arts. I mean, if you are coming at me with the knife,
I don't have to shoot you.
I don't have to shoot you in the head.
In the head, exactly.
I mean, I can shoot you. I can drop you to the ground.
That's the whole thing. I saw that. I saw two videos. I saw one video in Washington D.C. near the White House where a guy had brandished a knife. And the cop just shot, or it was the State Department, or it wasn't a cop, but it was like a forest trooper or one of those people, a ranger. Yeah, that's right. I think he was a ranger. He just shot him right there in front of the cameras and everything. I just thought that's my first murder on television.
So,
and there was no question about it later. This was about 20 years
Well, he had a knife. That's
he had a knife.
Boom.
That's it.
The world shows you that there's alternatives to that way of dealing with that situation, right? And there's analogs in a bunch of other professions where they're problematic perennial problems, whether it's teachers dealing with students a certain way, whether it's um, engineers, environmental engineers in indigenous communities. There are cultures that sustain themselves, and once you become, once you are trained into that culture, it becomes more real to you, and you see the world through that. So everything becomes a reinforcement of that, because also you're limiting your actions to what that would dictate. And so the only thing you see as possible is the reactions to your actions, which are dictated by that culture. So of course it becomes more real. And at some point for the old guard, it's so hard to stretch yourself out of that. Like no one knows how to stretch someone out of something like that 30 years into them, like working themselves into this. So to bring this back, that's why you want to, I wonder, where does this start in Paul's circles, in Paul's background or training? Where does he get the sense that does it start from university where certain teachers are telling certain stories and he's learning from those stories, and then one day he's on the job and his only point of reference of what to do really is, well, this is tricky, but this guy told me to do this once and it seemed to work for him, so I might do that. I'm not sure. I don't know how it gets built up.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I understand what you mean by I don't understand. So I understand that Paul has worked with the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs in these kinds of development projects in First Nations territories.
Yeah.
And what is it that you're trying to figure out about his mentality about it?
What was the process that distilled or curdled in him this mentality he first had of with regards to how he approached indigenous communities once he went to the north? Or what was the whole?
I would guess it has nothing to do with university.
Yeah, but
university has to do with problem solving and figuring out how to take the steps to arrive at the solution. But it doesn't, engineering. I don't think of engineering as dealing with relationships.
Right. So maybe that's the absence of that is where it starts. Right. You could put it that way.
Yeah, but the thing is, 95% or 98% of engineering graduates are not going to be going into that kind of job.
No,
going into many other kinds of
but
jobs.
But every job is a job which involves dealing with people.
Yes, but it often involves with dealing with people in a company, and it doesn't
different.
Involve in creating some kind of project that's going to have an impact on a minority of people that are traditionally treated differently than the majority. There's a completely different set of dynamics there.
But there is a kind of universal thing where unless you start your own consulting, like Paul eventually did, you're going to work for a company that's servicing people a certain way, that has a certain culture, maybe better, maybe worse, but you're right that I doubt that there's an active building of this ignorant culture at university. I don't think it happens that way.
I don't think
but
it happens at all.
Yeah, but
it might in other ways.
It might.
Not in the classroom.
No, not in the classroom, and it might in other ways. You're right. Like the competition between that you're having with your peers to get the Google job is developing this mentality that is it's very go get it, and I'm gonna get it, and I need my plan, and I need to execute it, and that's the way I go about the world at large. And so it might be training you for that, but they're now at Waterloo. It's now mandatory as an engineer to take a few English or humanities classes, which is great, maybe, but the idea of it is great.
Yeah.
The idea is that employers come back to Waterloo with comments like, "This guy has no interpersonal skills. This guy can't deal with people." And sure, it's common for engineers to be like nerds, and that's part of their strength is they have comes with those weaknesses. It doesn't mean that can't be compensated for in class and in work. And in work to get in projects, there's something about the way that the maybe the curriculum is taught, or the projects are assigned and supposed to be done a certain way, that clearly doesn't do enough to help grow the interpersonal side of engineers.
It's
often lacking.
It comes back to me as we're talking about this in the United Nations model, United Nations, that there should be a faculty of communications in universities where students actually learn practical ways of communicating.
And really, it should be integrated into like each of their classes.
Well,
because
it could be something. Yeah.
Well, so tell me why you think it should be a separate thing.
Because it's more of a skill than knowledge, right? It's not knowledge based. A lot of courses at university level are you are being
theory.
You are given information, and what do you do with that information? Whereas communication is also information, but it's not about
skill.
It's applied information, and it's for the purpose of not retaining knowledge, but being able to have an ability, and that I think would. I mean,
I totally agree.
Many people have that ability would be
much, and it's if I think of Body UN, like you say, it's the communication faculty, because the communication side of things is about much more than just like there's so many aspects of it.
There's so many aspects,
There's so many things to become subtle at. And it just shows me once again that like university is extremely good at giving content, or it's good. Maybe it's inertial, and there's a lot of inertia, and they're not up to date with maybe what would be the most useful content now. But that's what it has done historically. But really good teachers are good at helping you come to embody what the use of that is in a context, right? And right now, that's happenstance. Did you get the good teacher, the bad teacher? Did you get a good cop or a bad cop that day? It's left up to the chance that you were a university professor with all your pressures to push out a certain number of papers and get a certain tenure, and despite all that, you still managed to remain caring and focused on the growth of people in your class. Think about that culture too. And like back to my imagination of this lower race character. How common is that?
Well, so therefore, how if you were to have a faculty like that, I don't know if the faculty might be the wrong term for it, but if you did have an organization that provided classroom training for the students, who would teach that? You can't just choose the best profs from every.
You can't have the same process, because the process for university professors is a process of creation of academics, really. It seems to me like what you need to do to rise as a professor and into a professor before that is a very it's a very specific set of skills, few of which involve the closest you get to communication in that process is the writing, right? Like academic writing is not just about using these words, but it's about communicating ideas clearly. So you get that, good. There's so much more, and when you're teaching, you're not writing to your students. You're speaking, and maybe you get to meet with your advisors frequently enough that you get good at that too. But that's a certain type of communication. That's ideas. It's not, you're talking about something that would help people embody and use their ideas with other people in a way that they could build on them, that they could create them, that they could communicate with them, right? You're talking about and debate them and all these
Not
things.
necessarily. That could be an aspect of it. That's why I'm thinking it's not a single course.
Negotiation. Yeah,
It's actually
exactly.
more than a course because, you know, if you mentioned writing is a form of communication. Well, so the oral part of writing would be to communicate the same idea by speaking. So public speaking is an aspect of communication that could be taught in this. Negotiation could be taught. Imagine if you, so with the United Nations, how do diplomats become diplomats? You know, how do they get to the point of being able to learn all those subtle techniques of being able to understand what someone else is saying and get to, some people are very skilled at it because they're not skilled but talented at it.
Sure.
But
Part of it is knowing the language too.
knowing the
It's being
language,
in the environment.
using language effectively to be precise with what you want to say.
Probably a lot of it is just being there for a long time and soaking it in, and
Being able to listen.
listen, and not
Listening
just
could be a course in itself.
listening as like every course, but you're saying. I think what you're saying, and what I'm saying too, is that university would make for much more skilled people who are skilled at large, people who because specific training. The thing about learning about calculus is I can do it online. So can I learn about even the most advanced engineering. It's all online now. With COVID, you realize that the type of learning that is information transmission it requires a very good teacher, and that same and maybe a few different one, maybe for a certain type of people this approach, maybe others a more direct approach, a few different types, a few very good teachers for a few different types of people, and that's it. Anyone now in the world could learn this if they also had, like right now, some discipline and but the thing is, isn't it funny that teachers have to go to teachers college, but university professors need a PhD, they need to write articles. It's not a teaching process in order to become a teacher there, a professor. It's an academic process. And as if the things that make people learn and retain later on in life can be reduced to just their raw interest for ideas. It's all about the teacher, really. And that's the difference to me. That's the only reason right now I can say that I could learn anything online as good, if not better, as I do in class. Because often the teachers don't add that extra something that makes it more than just learning the stuff. It makes it putting it in the context of my life and my world and what I'm going to do with it and why it's useful, when it's useful, with whom it's useful, how do I do that? That's the thing that is missing in higher education. And maybe it's not maybe when you get to seminar courses or certain types of courses, you get more of that. But it should be from the start. Because even in high school, it's there. In high school, you have to do group projects, and in university you do, but the teachers are so much more removed because, again, they've had this academic process of training, which allows them to focus on their research, and the teaching is a way for them to pay for using the university as a tool for their research. You know what I mean? Like it's your payment to us for us supporting your research is you're going to teach these people who are paying us money.
Yes.
And so in that case, you lost my thought a bit. It's removed, and the group projects at university, the teacher has very little. You can't teach 400 people. Sorry, I noticed online it's even worse because you don't have that interpersonal thing. But when we were 6 or 7 people, me and the Spanish class, we got really close, even though there was that barrier of online, that reduction in depth of communication that comes with doing things online. So you can only lecture to 400. You can't teach 400. And because of that, you get that stuff in upper year courses. But by then, really, it should be. It needs to build on. It needs to build continuously. If you're going to have communications courses in university, they wouldn't be seminar courses. They wouldn't be lectures, large lectures. It wouldn't work. There is a mandatory public speaking.
You're right. Yes,
There's a mandatory public speaking first year class for some departments, and people find it boring because it's theory.
Oh, yeah.
There's things that you learn theoretically,
Yeah.
but then there's things you need to learn through practice in order to
Of course.
embed that
So
theory.
why would
Why?
anybody ever take that course? Take a
It's
Toastmasters
because they have
course.
to. Exactly. It's ridiculous, but it's a requirement. So the engineering students have to take a certain number of humanities. These are the courses they have to take. So how much does it really help? Right? Great idea, but if you
Sounds like a cable prescription.
cable,
You watch the channels that you want, and but you have 1,000 other ones behind you that you're paying for.
that you're paying for. That's kind of a good analogy, because you're paying for all that other stuff, and yet you're watching. You're not engaged. You're a recipient. It's part of.
Yeah,
at the
that
same time,
can't be like that. So it would have to be small groups.
It's a skills course.
High
as
school
opposed
size
to a knowledge
things.
course.
Yeah, high school size things. Or if it's going to if it's going to be 400 people, you're going to need 20 teachers.
You could have a model UN.
Yeah.
That's part of the
I know.
course.
You could
The
have
course could be that every class could have a model UN.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have 20 students,
Yeah.
here, do this.
each
this,
one has to organize
2
one.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
They-
Or there could be 20 clubs on campus, like Model UN, with different sides of things. One is Model UN, one is Model Parliament, one is Model engineering stuff. Each creating a context that you will likely face if you pursue a certain career in a certain department which you're interested in. And one of the mandatory things for you as a student, we're university, we're not good at that. We acknowledge that. For God's sake, we created a communications course. That's theory. Actually, 10 of them. Even the upper year ones are like that. So we did that and we charged you for it. We're not good at that. But you're going to you're going to take part in one of these clubs, one of these 20 clubs. There's variety out there. You pick the one that interests you. And you're just going to engage with those people through your 4 years.
But the problem with that is that it can't be a club. There has to be feedback. There has to be structure.
Yes, so it can't
Because
just be a
A
club.
club, like anybody
Yeah.
can be part of a
So
club.
in a club, like
some
you were
people-
saying earlier, that Model UN needs to be better integrated with departments.
Yes.
And so here's where it comes in, right? For a communications class, you have you could do it by faculty. The professors you hire are people who are maybe experts in negotiation in those specific areas that faculty people tend to end up working in. So like mediation in the UN would be for politics, and the people you would hire, people who have worked there, who have worked in different communicatory contexts in what those fields could go towards in a career.
Sure.
And then those 20 people for that department are going to be your academic liaison and kind of administrators for that club. So they're actually now helping you, like, except then I really do notice that it's very likely students would be better at designing the experience of it, and then the profs would be better at knowing what's required from that experience in order for them to understand the cases of each person. So, okay, how am I going to give you feedback on this? Are you progressing? Are you not? And they're involved with that with us, and the 20 other clubs. So like you say, it can't just be a club. It has to be integrated with departments so that there's a way for the assessors in those departments to get an actual, tangible glimpse on the progress people are and are making.
It's a great idea. We're talking about creating a communications faculty at universities.
So who is going to be professor?
That's a good question.
That's the first question.
And what would be the courses? And how would they be relevant to each
Yes.
faculty? So you would want, as we're talking about this, as we're developing the idea, we're talking about each faculty each profession requiring certain skills in communication, depending on what it is that you're working in and what kind of environments will you be working in and what you will have to communicate. And having a communications faculty that provides courses for members of different faculties that address their needs.
Is there a communication faculty of any university?
Yes,
There is.
They are.
there is at Waterloo. And
There's a communications faculty?
there's a communication studies like minor or something. It might be with one of the small university colleges. There are many communications courses offered at Waterloo, and they might not be grouped or labeled as communications. But there's a communications in engineering, this and that is mandatory for all engineering students.
But what does
I
it
wonder
look
what it looks like. I don't know. But I don't know what they look like for each department. What I do know is what the ones that are mandatory for everyone look like. I don't know everybody, but many of my friends, not me, but for some reason not me, were required. I think my friends in the science faculties and engineering faculties, they were required to take public speaking course.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yes, but then here's the problem. How do you learn public speaking? You do it, yes? These were all lectures. Theory. This is one technique. This is another. For your project, you will have to give a speech in one of these techniques. Okay. But no practice of that in the class. There's no point to 90% of the theory if you're only going to use the 10% that's left in your presentation. There's no point. You'll forget it all. You might think of it once, in one context. Maybe you won't. And so the way these courses are structured is the same as the way any course is structured. And the problem is there are things you learn, there's knowledge you learn, and there are skills you learn. It's a very different type of learning. You know this.
Sure.
And often skills are learned and refined in the workplace. But what you end up with is, for employers, you end up with a lot of people who are very inept at the good majority of what work is at a company, which is working with people often. Working well with people. I do my stuff, but I'm good at communicating with you. I'm good at collaborating with you. I'm good at taking criticism. A lot of people who, as you know, Waterloo has an internship program, co-op. And a lot of the comments that employers, especially employers of engineering and science students, send back to the university have to do with this person has no interpersonal skills. They cannot work well in a team. Either they are very solitary, they don't share ideas, they don't receive feedback well, that's another option. They hand in their work late, or they don't do what they're assigned to do because they are not good at asking questions, or they ask too many questions, they don't figure it out themselves. So all this stuff that has to do with finding your way to work well in the company with other people is something that is very visceral. It's not a skill you have here. It's something you do in order to become good at. And the University of Waterloo, and I'm sure most universities, do not give courses that are about doing. Maybe upper year courses, but by then only a few people are in them, and that's the point. If you're a professor, you cannot, and you are expected to teach 400 people public speaking. You cannot do it. Actually, you could probably do it in practice, but you would need a very different approach than what a professor usually takes to give such a large course they're learning. And so we are talking about what they would need. First of all, who would teach this course? What do they? Often the background, these courses, because communication is so many different sides of it, right? The type of person you need as a teacher for something like this is very different than what you need to disseminate knowledge. Pretty much anyone who knows about something can figure out a way or a few ways to tell that to other people in a way that at least they will be forced to learn it. The very good professors figure out a way to say something to give you knowledge in a way that will make it stick and make it stick usefully. You will use it, and that's why it will stick. That's not clearly mandatory or necessary for knowledge-based things, but it absolutely is for, like, all the more necessary for things that have to do with practice. You cannot tell someone, so this is how you would practice it. Let's move on. You cannot say that. You have to do it, and you have to be some professor who is not an academic necessarily, but who is someone who maybe is a specialist who has worked their whole life in negotiation or has worked their whole life in mediation. And these are the types of people that would be better teachers of this. And
communication, I would imagine, in any profession, whether you are an engineer, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, or so, the communication is very important. But how do you express yourself, and how do you pass your ideas or knowledge to the others?
Yes, and that's one side of it.
Excellent engineers who were saying, I can give a lecture of something which I know, and now I can do. But talking about something, just something, I don't know how to.
Right.
And this is, I understand, because I am the same way. If I had to talk about some subject, I would have to learn about it. When I did, I could talk about it. I would definitely, if I had some tutoring on how to express myself better and so on, it would improve my
ability. You would need to practice
lecture. But I can do it. Maybe what I do it's a little bit boring for somebody. And the same is with the teachers which I had, the professors, technical professors at the university. Somewhere there was one exception. He was excellent. He was passing his knowledge in such a way that it was so interesting you were getting interested in that what he was saying. And the others he was talking very dry knowledge.
So what you are describing is a difference. What you are describing is probably a difference in talent and not in skill.
Yes.
Right? So one was talented in being able to to communicate ideas in a way that made them not only interesting but somehow relevant. You could understand the relevance, and so they became more interesting. The other person was not able to do that. The other person just gave you information. But whether I am talented at this or I am not talented, if you are talented and I'm not talented, then you will be the memorable teacher and I will not. However, does that make me hopeless, or could I be better? Could I be more similar to you? Sure, because you can develop techniques to mimic what the other person is doing. You had to take Toastmasters, right? You had to do the Toastmasters course at some point, did you not?
Yes, and
so Toastmasters is an organization that helps you develop your ability to speak publicly. But they do that by working on skills, specific skills to make your topic more interesting, specific ways to make it more not only interesting, easy to understand, easy to follow, teaching someone how to communicate.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a professor in order to know this skill. You might need to be a supervisor or a member of management or a diplomat or whatever it is you're going to be going into. There are certain skills that require practice. You might be very talented at it, or you just need to practice and learn these skills. So you said that you had engineers who were excellent, but they said that they could talk about something that they know, but they couldn't talk about something that they don't know. There are not many situations, I think, in our lives where we need to talk about something we don't know. But we do need to talk about what we know in a way that allows others to be interested, to absorb what's being said, to think about specifically what it is that we want to communicate, which is part of communication, right?
That's right.
So all of these aspects are skills-based. They are skills that you can teach. You can learn how to do this.
Yes, I think so.
There's very different.
And also, it is when you're speaking publicly. If you do that often, well, you get used to it, and
Yes.
you can.
Sure.
It makes it
Yeah.
easier for you. If
Yeah.
you do it once in a while,
Yes.
then you become tense. You can so probably some courses in it would make you
More comfortable.
Come
Which is the
easier.
part of the point of Toastmasters, right?
what?
Which is part of the point of Toastmasters. Toastmasters forces you every week to speak
Yeah.
publicly. Every week you have to do something. It doesn't have to be really long, but you do it.
Yeah.
Here's your assignment for this week. Here's what you're working on this week. Next Tuesday, you're going to have to talk about it.
And is there any, is it just you go home and you prepare and you bring it? Probably,
Yeah.
right?
Not exactly. Well, yes, that is it. But you are working on different skills within the as far as I understand, I've never taken Toastmasters, but I've had people present it to my class.
Yeah.
And you work on different communication skills, and you build, because there are different levels of Toastmasters, right? And there's a book that you go through, and this week you're going to have to talk about something personal that shows an experience where you learned something valuable, let's say, okay? And you have 5 minutes to speak. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Yeah.
You have 10
Difference.
minutes to speak.
Huge difference.
Yes. and what are you going to include in that, and how are you going to start off, and how are you going to grab our attention, and how are you going to end up, and all of those things are points that you have to hit,
Yeah.
right? And you are part of a group.
Yeah.
There's 5 people.
Yeah.
Each person has to do this.
Yeah.
One person does it, the other people evaluate it based on this. They give you feedback.
Yeah.
So you're doing this regularly,
Yeah.
right? So it's a building step-by-step process.
Yeah. I'm just
Also, it comes to my mind. Well, I was a young engineer and I was assigned to present with another person who was an much older engineer, with much more experience, and we were two assigned to present the lectures about the compressor and compressing gases to the sales engineers who had the technical knowledge to a certain extent, but they had a lot of experience in talking because they were selling them. So we had lectures in all our branches, branch offices through all the Canada, starting from Montreal. We didn't go to the east, but then to the Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver, and so on. In each we had we divided ourselves the subjects, what I will be talking and what he will be talking. And I prepared myself and prepared the diagrams and so on, and I was doing very, very well. And in Calgary, at that time, the president of the company, Winton Hines, was in Calgary, and he came to our meetings, and he really liked what I was I was presenting so there were a number of sales engineers, and I remember there was one, Bill Cass. He was from Texas. He was a guy from Texas, very good salesman. And Winton said, "Bill, would you now? You heard Steve explain those pulsations, could you tell us
what you understood?"
Yes. So Bill came, and he didn't know anything. He couldn't tell, but he started to talk. And Winton said, "Well," he told him, "Bill, you are a very good salesman, but you don't know the subject."
That could be part of communications.
Yeah.
How to sell something, how to get people interested. There's so many aspects.
it's so alive because it's like a force. You can pick out aspects, but then there's how do you put these things together? Because that's a whole other almost discussion and level. We could keep this discussion at just going from just the what to the how in universities, where universities are teaching you what, cool, but you're not retaining much of it because you don't have a how to use it, when to use it, where all these are procedural things as opposed to propositions.
Well, you do have that in science, right? You have labs.
Have labs, but the labs are almost they're predetermined.
Yes.
This is your assignment.
Yeah.
Do this, and so yeah, you'll get some fluency in doing things faster, working with a partner, and all these things are good. Even especially actually if they're learned implicitly. But there's not especially. Sorry, there's an implicit part and there's an explicit part where you could. But something like a lab, say you're not doing well with your lab partner because of something. Is that something that, like, there's no way
Then you go to the communication
Right.
department to learn how to communicate with your partner.
and to learn, and you kind of have to. It is, because that's so interesting, because the communication department can't know the specifics of each of the issues that different pairs or groups are going to bring to them.
Sure.
They can't, but they can't know how to move through them. There is some universality about conflict resolution and about getting on the same page. And so they don't need to know in advance. They don't need to prepare a curriculum. That's why it's a practice. That's why it can't be you're going to learn this semester. You have no idea what you're going to learn.
But you could, but I could say, for whichever students I have in my class and I'm teaching this, I could say, okay, now imagine you are with a partner, and you have to create this.
Yeah.
But your partner is like this, and you are like that. Whether you're in a lab, whether you're working on some presentation for a economics course, whether you're whatever it is. How do you get to? How do you do this? We do this in my class, but of course we do it as part of communication as opposed to not conflict resolution. But we do, I've talked about being assertive. I've talked about diplomatic language.
Yeah.
These are all aspects that we do at a very lower level.
Yeah.
But those are certainly things that would be interesting in class because these are all issues. Also, they're not esoteric. They're very practical.
You feel them,
right? Yeah.
And probably the best way to make you feel yourself moving through them would not to imagine a scenario, but actually create a scenario that's likely to cause conflict and have that be the first half of the class. So, almost like an impossible task, and then see what comes up, and then have each group work on that. Like next week, we're doing the same thing, and I'm not going to tell you anything right now. Actually, you're going to think this week, and you're going to come up with ideas maybe, or just come up with ideas and send them to me, so I know what you're thinking about in terms of how to progress this. And there's part of this that can be like you say, labs or any sort of practice that you're thrown into is perfect for getting you. It's even better than imagine a bunch of scenarios, because if you do it, you don't have to imagine it. You're right there, and you're feeling them, and then when you have a breakthrough on one, you feel that too. You feel it as opposed to having to imagine what it would be like to tell someone to be assertive. You actually become assertive after maybe 10 classes, but you finally that one. You did it once. Maybe for the next 5, you won't know where that came from. That happens too. And so, but to go back to the earlier thing, that's like the how, right? That's like the skills. But then there's, now we're really dreaming, but there's like a level deeper than that, which is how do all these things fit together in your case?
Well, that would be just like with any other faculty, you would be able to choose courses that you wanted to take. Maybe 2 courses in communication would be mandatory, and then there would be other courses that would be very specialized. Well, I don't want to say very specialized, because specialized,
differentiation.
That then you could choose to take based on your personal need.
Yeah.
So the ones which are mandatory would be mandatory depending on which faculty you're from. Okay, you're from engineering, you have to take this course on negotiating a proposal, or selling a particular project or something like that.
What I'm saying in terms of the why, or the putting it together more, is there was something you said that made me think of that.
Well, anyhow, the subject communication should be
Let it be resolved.
available at the university.
Yes. I don't think it is
not-
to that degree.
Not like
no.
that, not practiced.
Not practiced.
There's the theory is available in any university. Any theory you want to learn about anything, they can offer it to you. Either you go there, or maybe if it's at a higher level, you need to find this professor at this other university and move your life over there. But you can find people who have certain knowledge. But you could also find those people, like, I don't need a course to get that knowledge. I need that's not necessarily true. Someone
need
can
more,
be
the other
skilled.
less.
Someone can be skilled at helping
Yeah.
me. Yeah. That's not. Yeah, and some can be more and less. But it's more like none of that knowledge helps me become skillful at, bringing that into my life and bringing my life into that. Like applying it and having it change me and using it. All of that stuff is pretty much
Up to your
relegated. It's up to you.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Just like it's by chance. Did you find the job that at that point in your life will help you learn those things or those things? And you will learn something, but maybe you'll learn the wrong things.
Yeah.
Just like it's up to chance whether you'll get the right prof or the wrong prof who will make it stick for you. And all these things that are up to chance are some of the more important things. Like once I live a bit more, I actually will have much greater ability to, I'm finding for myself that now, like, having left university, I know what to seek out in terms of, I don't know enough about this, I need to learn more about that. I know that skill of seeking out, and actually once I know how to, once I have a desire and a need to seek it out to like fill myself out, I retain the stuff. I take good notes. I learn how to do those things that professors hope you will learn in learning this content that's kind of removed from your life. So when I stepped out, and it's weird, right? Like,
Well, because it's self-directed.
It's self-directed,
Yeah.
which has its pros and cons. The cons are that, well, what are the cons? The cons are
You might not.
I'm
know
not
what
with
you
it. Yeah, I might not know what I need, and I might not be exposed to. I might be exposed to only questions that I was bound to think of. So I might become like, boxed in, or too boxed out. Like I can have different imbalances.
because you have your own limitations.
Yes, I might not meet the people. I might not have the interactions with people that I need in order to ask
Stimulate
better
your
questions.
ideas and realize, oh, there's this, there's
Exactly. So there's that. But then it's a question of, okay, I'm actually now much better at, like if I were to go to university now, I'd be much better at, if there's a class out there that does show me what I want to learn, that offers what I want to learn, I'd be much more receptive of that one because I want it. I'm not needing of it for some indefinite purpose in the future that maybe this will be useful, maybe not. No, now I have I figured out a kind of things I need to put together, and now I need to learn about those things and practice those things. So, for example, I'm sending these things out to mentors. The thing that kind of got me started on this is I met this prof at Waterloo last fall, and he said, you've left university now, maybe that'll work out for you. Maybe it won't. If it doesn't, come back, and we can build some upper year courses together and work on some theses. Cool, right? Like maybe now maybe he could help me with that, or he knows someone who would have, or a bunch of people who I'd be able to do that with. So now it's not only because I have the back and the out and in, like there's people that commit fully, and there's people that commit fully to the opposite. There's people that drop out for good. There's people that, what I'm saying is, you need benefit a lot from the the longer you can deal with not being sure of something, and having that hit you again and again, the more it can be stimulating. It can be stimulating. It can actually, if you can deal with it, you can become very skillful at things that, unfortunately, you tend to learn the opposite in university. What I mean by that is, like, when you're in university, the objectives are mandated. It's clear, if not explicitly, then implicitly. I need to do well, right, in classes, so that someone will hire me. I need to take prerequisites. These are the things that are, and whether or not I like it or not, that's going to teach. Not only are those subjects and the specific content I imbibe from that going to teach me a certain thing and not teach me other things, whether it's because of the content or whether because it's all theoretical and none is like this communication thing we've been talking about that's embodied. So it's going to teach me to be more academic, perhaps, or to at least be like to separate things. This is thoughts, and now there's my life, and where does it meet? It's harder for that, and I hear a lot of my friends saying this same thing, where I've learned all these things, I forget most of them because I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm after, and I don't know how to put it together.
But are they already in the work world? Or
now they're in the work world. They've graduated. Like my friend Chris graduated, and he's like, I hope I get a job somewhere. Otherwise, I'm gonna go do a master's degree. Right? It's deferring your responsibility to feeling more competent by getting another thing, or to at least putting it off.
Well, that's also
That's
partly
common.
due to competition and
Competition.
the number of people who are trying to get the same job.
And it's a common problem, but it's a problem that's
What are you talking about?
What are we talking about?
we're talking about the
experience of how we learn in university.
and how that can be complemented by learning outside of university, how that can be, how to make that a really meaningful period in your life. For a degree is worth something to your employer to hire you, but to the person taking it, the variance in how much it has helped you, how much it has changed you, how much it has matured you in good ways and in bad ways, hopefully in better ways. The variance in that, in all that subtlety, is huge. I know friends who are very clever people, but they have gone about their education in such a way that despite their intelligence, they have not gained a lot of wisdom or aptitude for the world and to contribute to the world.
They're educated folks.
Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, university, so we're maybe asking, does university make you an educated fool? And if it does, what do you complement it with in order for it to not turn you into that, but to actually be a part of your cultivation process?
Okay. So what is your plan now?
Okay, no. Yes, we can't.
Well, about yourself.
But I'm saying
Yourself.
If you listen, I'm telling you my plan, but implicitly.